Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Today, we end our look at Big Finish's adaptation of The Prisoner with Volume 3. Volume 3 was released in November of 2019, written and directed by Nicholas Briggs and starring Mark L. Staub as number 6. The Prisoner Volume 3 also features Lorelei King and Lucy Briggs Owen. As always, because I do these unscripted, there is a blanket spoiler warning in place in case I decide to talk about spoilers. If you do not wish to be spoiled, in the description box below is the link to Big Finish's website where you can purchase The Prisoner Volume 3. This set consists of 4 stories, and this time it's a more even 50-50 split. 2 of the stories are remakes of episodes of the TV show, and 2 of the stories are original. Kinda. We'll get to that in a moment. So this time around, we have in order Free for All, a remake of the episode of the same name, The Girl Who Was Death, a remake of the episode of the same name, The Seltzman Connection. This is where that kinda came in because, in Volume 1, all of the remake episodes were names of episodes of the show. And then in Volume 2, all of the stories were credited. So, I Met a Man Today was Many Happy Returns, and Project 6 was A, B, and C. We don't have either of the case here. So, while I believe this is meant to be interpreted as an original story, this episode also borrows very, very heavily from the episode Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. Not to the point of being a remake. Again, the plot plays out very differently. And then we have our finale, No One Will Know. Ranking these stories is actually pretty hard. Not just in regards to the other 2 sets, but just because in terms of quality, this is probably the most consistent set. All of the stories are really neck and neck. If I had to go out on a limb, I would probably say No One Will Know, the finale, is my favorite episode. But again, it's really tough. And then I think from there, I'd say my second favorite is The Girl Who Was Death. And then those last 2, Free for All and the Seltzman Connection, it's really hard to decide between these. And so as the finale, honestly, I don't entirely know what to make of Volume 3. Because I am, once again, having the same problem I have been having with these reviews. I am not judging these sets on their own merits, unfortunately. As it is a remake of the original series, I have been comparing and contrasting this iteration of The Prisoner with the original show. And I feel part of me understands the trouble with that. It feels like I'm not giving this a fair shot on its own merits. And in that regards too, this is probably the most difficult one to talk about. Again, just in terms of review, in terms of quality, in terms of my feelings on it. Overall, I think this might be the second strongest set. If I was to rank them at the moment, because I just finished these and I feel like my thoughts have changed since filming my previous videos, I would probably say Volume 1 is the weakest. It's got really strong stories, really good takes on those episodes of the show, really interesting ideas and updates. But then listening to Volume 2 and Volume 3, Volume 1 is the safest. And then I think Volume 3 is the second strongest. And at the moment, this really could change at any second, I might say Volume 2 is my favorite. So, And just a heads up, I always do that little spoiler warning because I do these unscripted. I may decide to talk about spoilers. I will be spoiling how Big Finish's version ends. I am still not going to spoil the ending of the show because I think more people are going to watch the show than check out Big Finish's version. And I really don't want to give away the ending. I haven't made very many Prisoner videos. Yeah, I know. Prior to my Big Finish reviews, I only did a video ranking the number 2s of this TV series. And even there, I was really trying not to spoil the ending. Because the ending, I think, will still take so many people who watch it by surprise. Okay, I think modern audiences will catch on to what the big twist in the final episode is. But beyond that, I think there is still enough in the ending that will take new viewers, completely by surprise. They will not expect most of it. And the ending here plays out very, very differently. I'm also conflicted because Big Finish's remake seems to be a little more concrete. You know, the TV series did not adhere entirely to logic. It was more steeped in allegory or symbolism. You know, if something logically did not make sense in an episode of The Prisoner, it's because the episode was operating on a more allegorical line of thought. And Big Finish is very rooted in this sort of science fiction reality. It is a little disappointing coming from the original series and going into that, but I feel like, yeah, as big a fan of the show as he clearly is, Nicholas Briggs knows modern audiences want answers. So I think he is trying to sell this to as many people as possible. Whether you consider that a pro or a con, that is entirely up to you. If that is his intent, I can understand where he's coming from, because modern audiences, again, just crave answers. They want to know by the time the story ends, everything that happens. And as much as I love The Prisoner, I have difficulty recommending it to people because it doesn't do that. So let's get into the stories themselves really quick, because that is the bulk of this story. Not much to say about the performances. You know, what I said about Mark Elstob in my Volume 2 review still holds true here. He's really crystallized into his own take on number 6, while still being that iconic character. I think Elstob's version of number 6 is a little bit softer. He's a little more human. In episode 1 of the show, Arrival, number 2 said to Patrick McGoohan as number 6, that's like, is that really right? Why you resign? God, I don't even remember what the line was now, excuse me. But he says that number 6 claimed he resigned because of some sense of morality. But we never know what it is. Elstob seems to be a little more human. Like, I've started seeing stuff surface looking into the show more and more that Patrick McGoohan wanted to play number 6, not quite as the protagonist, but as more of an anti-hero. And I talked about this in my past reviews too, about how number 6 is meant to be an unlikable protagonist. Like, so, you know, sort of two parallel thoughts on the same character. Elstob's is a little more human. He is a little more emotional, whereas McGoohan was very cold, understandably so. Elstob, we see much more the toll the village is taking on him and what his fight is doing, which ultimately is his undoing by the end of this version of the story. More on that when we get to the finale. But yeah, he still gives a solid performance. Lucy Briggs Owen is back. She was number 2 in Volume 2. She was in I Met a Man Today, and she was the number 2 of Project 6. She's back again. I'll talk about her more later. Our only other number 2 in this set is Lorelei King, who I really liked. I looked her up a little bit because in her story, Free for All, she's speaking with this sort of really outrageous, very clearly fake Southern accent. My dad's from Arkansas. I have family in Arkansas, so yeah, I even though I was born on the West Coast of the United States, I know Southern accents, so I know when they're really bad. But yeah, so I did look up Lorelei King because it was like, oh, that's so outrageous. That has to be a fake accent. She is an American actress who lives and works in the UK. I really like her number 2. She kind of has this clueless quality to her that we didn't see in a lot of number 2s. You know, even when they were putting on some kind of front, there was always this underneath that they were in control. They held all the cards. We don't get that with Lorelei King. Like, there are moments that obviously flabbergast her. Like, she is blindsided by a question or something, or she doesn't know how to proceed or what action to take in certain situations. In this particular, in Big Finish's adaptation of The Prisoner, she is probably the most unique number 2 in the series. My favorite is still Ramon Tikaram from Volume 1, but that's neither here nor there. I do like her very unique take on number 2. Given what we're about to learn, I don't know if it entirely makes sense, but yeah, thinking about it now too, I'm just, again, given what we learn in this volume, I wonder if the reveals we get here were always Nicholas Briggs's ideas. Because if so, especially with the character of number 2, then like in previous volumes, like Ramon Tikaram, John Heffernan, I blanked on his name for a second, and Lorelei King, their characterizations don't entirely gel with what Briggs reveals later on. But again, that's all going to come up when we talk about the Seltzman connection. Beyond that, I don't have much to say more on my overall thoughts, so let's just get into it. Our first story is Free for All. Now, in the original episode of the show, and in the plot of this story as well, number 6 is kind of convinced by number 2 to compete in the election to become number 2 for the village. And I'm going to be honest, I like Big Finish and Nick Briggs' version of Free for All way more than I liked the episode Free for All from the original show, because Free for All, just that entire plot line did not make sense. And not in the prisoner's usual sense of being ambiguous or being allegorical. It's just, I don't get what you were thinking here. Because, by the end of the episode, number 6 actually wins the election, only to be immediately stripped of power, if he had any at all, because it's very clear the powers that run the village were never going to let number 6 be number 2. And in Big Finish's version, the events of this election make more sense. Like, number 2 tries to plant the seed of having number 6 run against her as an opponent. This is the story where Lorelei King is number 2, by the way. And he's not falling for it. He thinks the village is up to something. But then he hears number 2's manifesto, where she preaches freedom. And, like this idea that, and she starts demonizing anyone who would be seen as other. And the idea that if they don't conform to the standards of the village, they would be deported from the village. So now here's where the big change in this particular plot is. Number 6 decides to run against number 2, and he adopts her manifesto as his own, saying that number 2 will never adhere to these policies, but if I become number 2, I will. See, he's hearing number 2's manifesto, hearing her plan. He has come up with a plan of his own. It's like, if I become number 2, if I make sure these policies take place, I can then get myself banished from the village and escape. And along the way, like in the original episode, number 6 is given an assistant, number 43. I don't know if that was her number in the original series, but this episode plays out very differently. Like I said in the episode itself, it was revealed to be a ruse. Number 6 was never going to be number 2, and number 43 in that episode was revealed to be the real number 2. Here, well, it's going to kind of go into the next story, but let's just say that worried that number 6 would not win the election, other members of the village come up with a plan to assassinate number 2. And in the power vacuum, he does become number 2. And that's where the story ends. And then we jump to the next story, The Girl Who Was Death. So this is one of the... I've said this in the past. The Girl Who Was Death is my least favorite episode of The Prisoner. I'm not going to get into it here, but the premise is number 6 is telling a bedtime story to some of the children of the village. And in this story, it's presented as like a mission when he was a secret agent or something. And he is hunting down a mad scientist. Said mad scientist has sent an assassin after him, the titular Girl Who Was Death. And he is chasing her down, trying to trace her back to her master, her handler, while she is chasing him down, trying to kill him. Here, and like I said, it never actually happened. It's presented as a bedtime story. In the Big Finish version, after being banished from the village, initially number 6 doesn't know what happened. He wakes up, in a hospital, seemingly having been comatose. And then over the course of the story, it's revealed what happened through flashbacks. Like, even though he had no idea what was going on with the assassination of number 2, because it put him in a position of power, he was seen as an accessory and he was banished along with number 43. And, well, now let's get to the big thing. Number 43 is the girl who was death. Like, the story brings this up. She was an assassin, and when she was sent to the village, she saw it as an escape from her life. Presumably, it's never said because she made several enemies. And she wanted number 6 to become number 2 because she thought he would make life better for everyone in the village. Like, she did not want to leave the village. Which, actually, now that I think about it, was kind of a big missed opportunity of the TV show. Like, number 6 was always trying to escape, and he would interact with people who would try to help or hinder him. But he never met people who wanted to stay in the village. And I think that could have been an interesting plotline that, again, the show just never picked up on. I love the show. I'm just making a note. I'm not critiquing it or anything. It's just something I noticed. But here we have it. And now that she is back in the real world, number 43, the girl who was death, wants revenge on number 6 for being kicked out of the village. So this story, unlike the TV episode, The Girl Who Was Death, is actually taking place in real life. Upon waking up from his coma after having been sent out of the village, number 6 also finds himself once again in the care of Kate Butterworth. Kate Butterworth was a character, again, in Volume 2, played by Lucy Briggs-Owen, and she was the number 2 of Project 6. And, of course, number 6 obviously doesn't trust her. He believes she's still part of the village, that she's still number 2, even though she seems to have no idea what he's talking about. Also from the village is, what was his number? I believe it was number 399. I'm not going to call him by his number or his character. Potter. Potter's the character's name, played by Glenn McCready, he was the one who assassinated number 2. And now that they're back in the real world, they seem to work, or have worked, because number 6 resigned, for the same agency. So they're kind of forced into this uneasy partnership. Actually, now that I think about it, 2 for 2, we have stories that I liked better than the TV show. Because again, The Girl Who Was Death is my least favorite episode of The Prisoner, and Free for All, just the plan in that original episode made no sense, even by The Prisoner's standards. So that brings us to the Seltzman connection. Potter, again Glenn McCready's character, kind of realizes that all of this began when number 6 went to meet his fiancée, Janet. Again, a plot point referenced in Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. And I'm going to recount that really quick. So, there is a scientist named Professor Seltzman. He came up with body swapping technology. Like, he could transplant minds between bodies. Now, the village had part of this technology, but the process was incomplete. So in Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling, they put number 6 in another body and send him out of the village to find Professor Seltzman. Because even though he will never work for the village, they are holding his body hostage. And also Professor Seltzman would be the only one to know how to put his mind back in his body. And throughout the episode, they make mention of number 6 having met Professor Seltzman prior to the start of the series. And because Seltzman had vanished and no one knew where he was, number 6 was the last person to see him. And I believe it's also said, it's been a while since I've seen that episode. It is also said that number 6 helped Professor Seltzman disappear. Now, there is a subset of the Prisoner fandom who believes the events referenced in Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling, surrounding Professor Seltzman, are strongly tied into number six's resignation. And I mentioned this at the start of Volume 1 because it's how Departure and Arrival is set up. Nicholas Briggs is seeming to run with that theory. So now we're kind of getting into, and that's how a lot of the Seltzman connection plays out. Until number 6 and Potter meet up with Seltzman. And then we get the big change. Because again, in the episode, number 6 and Seltzman were friends. Professor Seltzman is the main antagonist of Big Finish's adaptation of The Prisoner. He is operating on this misguided sense of, I know the secret to world peace. And that's where the body swapping technology comes in at this point. Because he preaches to number 6 this idea that people have misconceptions, or people will already jump to conclusions just by talking to people or, even looking at them. So the idea is that if he had everyone switch minds, people would no longer have those misconceptions or those conclusions ready-made. They would actually have to talk to people and actually communicate. I totally forgot where I was going with that. So it's like, so the body swapping technology he believes is the key to world peace. Because, if you swap the minds of people and no one knows whose side they're on, you now have to talk to people. And this is where we get the big reveal that I was kind of talking about, where with what Briggs is building up, Lorelei King's, Ramon Tickerum's, and John Heffernan's portrayals of number 2 don't entirely make sense. Because Seltzman has abducted Kate Butterworth and is holding her hostage. Then he uses his technology, and she becomes number 2. So now there is this idea that number 6, throughout Big Finish's version of The Prisoner, may have been facing the same number 2 this entire time, but in different bodies. It's a question also that the series doesn't answer, thankfully, keeping to the prisoner's ambiguity. Like, he asks, have I been facing the same number 2 this entire time? And her response is the iconic, Lucy Briggs Owen's response is the iconic, that would be telling. We also learn that one of the people helping Seltzman in another body is his fiancée, Janet. And also through this confrontation, we actually learn why number 6 resigned. I'm not going to give it away, because, again, something I want you to find out for yourselves if you listen to this. But I do have to say I was disappointed. I will say, though, I like how it is revealed, even if I don't like the fact it is revealed at all. Because Seltzman tells number 6 why he resigned. He says, we knew this entire time. We just want you to admit it. And of course, number 6, being number 6, still refuses. He still wants to fight. So, and like I said, I just remembered what I was going to say. I like the way it's revealed, that, where it's Seltzman revealing why number 6 resigned, and him saying why, and him saying they knew the entire time, because it ties into one of my own headcanons about The Prisoner. Because in the original TV show, we never learned why number 6 resigned. Because the reason why number 6 resigned is irrelevant. It's unimportant. Like, I have this headcanon that the village, I think I mentioned this in a previous review, the village always wanted to abduct and imprison number 6. Just his resignation was just the perfect excuse. And the Seltzman connection kind of plays into that. Not quite that way, just his resignation is the perfect excuse. It's gonna ultimately, them wanting to admit why he resigned is gonna come into play in the next episode, so I'll talk about it there. But number 6 is still fighting, so of course they overpower him, and next thing he knows, he wakes up in Kate's body. And that brings us to our finale. No one will know. And again, the finale goes in a very different route than what the TV show's finale did. And I'm going to speak to this on its own merits because, again, don't want to spoil the finale of the TV show. It is interesting. So once he kind of regains his composure, like the first half of this story is him once again being abducted by his former handlers, having to convince them that it is him in Kate's body. Which, by the way, Lucy Briggs-Owen is fantastic in this story. She does a really good job of emulating Mark Elstop's performance and personality as his take on number 6. It's really well done. But then she reaches the opportunity to go back and confront Seltzman. And she also meets Potter, Glenn McCready, again. I am so bad at timing this out. Also, I think my battery is starting to go because it's not holding a charge as long as it used to. Anyway, sorry for that tangent. So she finally goes to She finally goes to confront Seltzman one more time. She meets number 2 in his body. Boy, that is a confusing sentence to say. Oh, that reminds me too. The other big difference from the finale of The Prisoner. There is no number 1. Which, again, really interesting. It's just this, I mean, I guess you can make the case that in this version, Professor Seltzman is number 1, but he's never addressed as such. So I think, yeah, the Big Finish version is building up to the fact that there is no number 1. And we finally get, and this is where I was talking about this version of number 6 being more human, because he is broken. He is defeated. On his way back to confronting Seltzman, he tells Potter that he just wants to see Janet one more time. And then the village can do whatever they want to him. He is done. He is tired. And it kind of dawns on him that the reason he was fighting the village for so long is because he was fighting. Like, at one point in this story, he debates, am I just keeping the fight going because that's all I know how to do? And then, number 6's former handlers, his former bosses storm into the area. There's a big kerfuffle where everything cuts out for a minute. And then his handlers wake up in the village. And once again, we have Lucy Briggs-Owen as number 2, but this time, we kind of get them going. We get his former bosses going through the motions of arrival, while number 6 himself is living a content life in the village with Janet. So this is the one thing I do want to say. This is the one spoiler I will give about the TV show's finale. I do think this episode, even though it plays to a very different story, still kind of captures the spirit of the TV show's finale, because the final shot of The Prisoner is one that is hotly debated, and it's one that caused people to really dislike that episode. Not getting into that. Hot take, I do kind of like the finale. But I do think this audio story, captures the essence, the spirit of that TV show finale, in that number 6 has ultimately lost. He has never, and he will never leave the village. It's just done in a different way. Like, he has been so battered and broken down that he has found a sense of acceptance and contentment. So yeah, that was The Prisoner Volume 3. Like I said, I just wish I knew what to make of it. There are some really good ideas here. A very different take on the finale and the ending that I have to admit I kind of like. But again, I'm held back by just constantly comparing it to the TV show. But those are just my thoughts. Have you heard The Prisoner Volume 3? What are yours? Start a conversation in the comments below. And remember to like, comment, subscribe. Click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload, and in the description box below, you'll find the link to my socials where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.